In this mini mystery of the JFK assassination, I asked for help from any sleuths out there to decode the famous letter to the editor that was supposedly sent by Lee Harvey Oswald under the heading News and Views from Dallas and the initials LH to the socialist newspaper The Militant, and which was published March 11th, 1963, just a little over 2 weeks before Oswald posed for the famous backyard photographs taken by Marina of Oswald with his pistol and Mannlicher Carcano rifle. Most writers agree that Oswald wrote this letter, that Oswald was the author, but was he? I agree with the consensus view that he was probably the author of this letter, but there have always been problems with this theory, namely that the writing style is incredibly polished and unusually so for the dyslexic Oswald. Now, of course, that could be explained by the fact that the editor of The Militant may have taken an editing pen to the letter before publishing it, and that is indeed probably what happened. But there are other problems with the content of the letter that make it hard to say with finality whether Oswald was the author or not. One of these things is the inclusion of a discussion of the California Democratic Councils and the New York Reform Democratic Clubs, which were political organizations that Oswald never spoke about or wrote about, as far as we know, in any other context. Now, Gene Davidson points out that Time magazine published some information about these Democratic clubs in the fall of 1962, and we know that Oswald subscribed to Time magazine. So that clears that mystery up. My call here is to ask others to investigate the question, where did Oswald learn about the plight of Marie Ortiz, a mother who was left homeless by a fire in Dallas after the landlord cut off her water and gas because of her poverty? Oswald, or whoever wrote this letter, was absolutely outraged by the treatment of Marie Ortiz and her family, and he goes on and on in this letter, as you can see if you look at the YouTube version on my YouTube channel, JFK Demystified. You can actually see the letter there and make up your own mind. But I've looked at the Dallas Morning News, and I noticed that they cover the Marie Ortiz story in January of 1963, but they only do so in one or two articles, and they do not include all the detail that Oswald, or whoever wrote this letter, includes in the letter. So, in order to pin down the authorship of this letter, it would seem to be necessary, if we want to attribute it to Oswald, to find a source that Oswald could have had access to in early 1963 that would have had the complete content of what he has to say about the interesting story of Marie Ortiz. We know it's not from the Dallas Morning News. We know it must be local because this was a Dallas story. And we know that Oswald did not own a television, so he could not have watched this on television. So where then? Was it the Dallas Times-Herald? So those of you who are interested in the JFK assassination and who may live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area might want to go down to the public library and look into the Dallas Times-Herald and see if there are other articles about Marie Ortiz with the wealth of information that Oswald includes in his famous letter to the editor, if indeed it was Oswald who wrote it, from The Militant, March 11th, 1963. Happy sleuthing!